thanking you for coming and saying how important that is, that the student body supports each other in that way. It's one of my favorite things about working here is the way that you guys are with each other. I think it's a really special thing. So I appreciate that you're all here, and I want you to encourage other people to come. Those of you who presented last term, I'm noticing there's a little bit different energy this term because you guys are so close to graduation, and it's so hard for you to be inside and focusing on things when you just want to escape and fly away. But remember, if you went last term, people who are presenting this term came to watch you. So make sure that you come to watch them as much as you can and remind other people of that too. So we give strong support to all the presenters. Any questions about that? Okay. If you're in the SE class, I remind you to do your reflections. If you get those done this week and then you do your personal reflection next week, it'll make the pace of finishing the course really, really smooth. So I encourage you as soon as the presentation is over to do that. Okay. And if you have any trouble accessing it on the Moodle site, ask a friend. Some people have already started to post theirs, so it should be clear. I think without further ado, they didn't really want me up here talking, so I'm going to give you a big circle.
Hi, thank you all for coming. Before I start, I'd like to let you know that the main focus of my presentation is me and what I'm saying, so I made this slide as simple as I could so that it doesn't distract me too much. But anyway, I'm Gabriel Sturgis, and I'm going to be talking to you about a modern money machine, which is the music industry. The music industry is one of the world's most prosperous businesses, and the driving force behind them is record labels. Record labels are the huge monopolies that run the system, and I like to call them the banks of the industry. According to Libby Botsford, who works at Berkeley, the industry is worth $45 billion globally. And that is a lot. That's almost enough money to buy like 6 MacBooks. That's insane. I'd like to start by asking you, does anyone recognize any of these labels? Okay, a couple of you, but thankfully not enough so that I can prove my point. The point I'm trying to make is that these labels are part of an enormous industry that's worth an enormous amount of money, but no one really knows that they're there. Everyone knows the celebrities, the music, the artists, but no one knows that the record labels are the people who control the money and sell to you, the consumers. And yet, there's an extreme amount of money going on there. Now, those usually large businesses have to compete with a very rapidly changing market and strategize against it in an era when online piracy is thriving. And their expenses are based on musicians that they employ, so that means that they have to count on them to succeed so that they can generate profit. That is an extremely unsafe investment because they have to fund everything a musician needs. As a result of those factors, the fact that labels have an extremely difficult job, they usually or sometimes squeeze as much money as they can out of artists and exploit their talents. Many artists have begun to independently release their music, but that doesn't guarantee their success because of the lack of funding and promotion that it allows. The answer lies in creating laws that call for the protection of artists. So it's extremely challenging in today's market to be able to pull off the work that record labels do. They have to both create a great product and sell it to an artist's fans. That is an extreme challenge in the modern world, considering all the small details that could be overlooked. Given the economic pressures under which they operate, their focus is to simply market artists and their merchandise in a way that generates revenue. And that is one hell of a job. In order to achieve that job, they have to predict the industry's flow, adjust to fluctuations, and strategize against those fluctuations within the market. A single song released by Adele could change the entire way the industry is working at the time, and they need to be able to predict that and adjust to it. In addition to those challenges, a label has an extreme variety of expenses that has to be taken into account. Money is the driving force behind the labels. Their profits are based on the success of musicians, so they have to facilitate their success to generate any type of profit. And for that reason, according to Catherine Rosenberg, who is a former student of law at Fordham University, the industry's unique structure warrants greater protection for labels, as they necessarily make large investments in an artist's career based primarily on the promise that the act will deliver the contractually stipulated number of albums. So to say that in a way that you guys will actually understand, That means that the laws of the industry, when they were made, people that made the laws understood that record labels have a very difficult job. So they're adjusted so that record labels have an advantage in that sense. Keep that in mind. That means that typically the industry sort of protects the labels, just like banks. Labels are banks. Keep that in mind as well. And again, labels are protected because they have a very difficult job. And that same student who researched the details regarding the ethics of record contracts admitted that it is safe to say that all labels assume some financial risk for their products. They could possibly end up generating no revenue. Now that I'm done telling you that what they have is a very hard job, let's start punching them right in the face. Unfortunately, those factors have resulted in labels developing cost-cutting, profit-driven attitudes that are all based around money. There's the big three labels, for instance, that own all of tiny, smaller labels and have them under their control. And according to Catherine Rosenberg, they have the ability to, quote-unquote, set the standards for the industry and the industry's legal aspects. So that puts them at an extreme advantage. That means that when they formulate their contracts with artists, they're only basing their contracts with previous deals that they've made before. There's no actual pre-existing legal template for the contracts that they make, so that they're able to adjust it however they like. And they usually throw in those big words in there that up-and-coming, inexperienced artists will never understand. These are the big three labels. I guess you all recognize those, right? They have an extreme amount of smaller labels under their control, and they're the ones that are the huge monopolies. They're, again, like the banks of the industry. Let me repeat that. That's a huge analogy I'm going to keep making, so get used to it. These all labels, all or almost all of them belong to those. So, in addition to those factors, labels sometimes exploit artists by rushing due dates, for instance, so that artists release tons and tons of music with the goal of having one popular hit. And they also add a gargantuan amount of expenses. And they claim that those expenses belong to the label. Let me read those expenses to you. Deductions such as recording costs, video production costs, foreign royalties, club royalties, packaging charges, reserves against free goods, payment on only 90% instead of 100% of records sold, and tons of other ones like live shows. Those deductions and reductions often leave artists unknowingly in debt, which is exactly what happened at 30 Seconds to Mars. Jared Leto's band, beautiful man, great movies. He is the lead singer of the band 30 Seconds to Mars, in case you didn't know. And what he told MTV was, there was a point after we had sold millions of records around the world where not only were we never paid a single penny, but we learned that we were millions of dollars. Alternative rock bands in the history of alternative rock, especially in pop alternative rock. So there's no reason for them to have ever gotten in debt. However, it's exactly because of the fact that the record label they were signed to, which is called Virgin Records, which is part of EMI, which used to be one of the big four until it was purchased by one of the big three now, applied a variety of costs to their contract. So they had tons of expenses that they had no idea they owed to the label. The incident is also an example of the manner in which labels sue for damages or also threaten to sue for damages to prevent artists from leaving them. If they sue for damages in a case that they know they're going to win, the artist is going to stay with the label and generate eventually more profit. Now, according to Owen Hussey, Prince's first and former manager, rest in peace, when an artist pays back the advances that a label paid to them, the label still owns their music. That means that, for example, I could pay back the label for the help that they gave me recording my project and performing live, but my music and my projects still belong to the label. Even artists themselves don't realize that contracts entitle the label to almost everything that the artist creates. That implies that artists are literally owned because what they do for a living, their passion, is owned by someone else. That's what Prince disputed in his famous incident with Warner Brothers, or similar. The recently deceased performer had a serious incident with Warner Brothers. As a young, inexperienced artist, he was unable to realize that the contract that he had signed did not allow him to release more than one album per year. And as a musical genius, that was not good enough for him. So he ended up fighting for his freedom. He constantly battled the label and achieved emancipation from it eventually, and signed to EMI, which is now part of Universal. Unfortunately, EMI was the label that screwed over 30 Seconds to Mars. So that just goes to show that though EMI sort of saved Prince from his contract that didn't allow him to release music, that still does not mean that they're the saviors. They still thought about their main goal is to think about money. In fact, Husney, which to remind you was Prince's former manager, he states that labels offer contracts that supposedly cover artists' expenses. But what those artists do not realize is that the label is calculating every single expense made on their behalf. They're not actually covering the artist's expenses. They're creating a huge, huge bill, an enormous bill, just like a restaurant, and then charging it to the artist. So the artists think the label is covering their expenses, but they're actually just getting charged, and they have to pay the label back. Now that's what sort of sets labels apart from banks, which is the fact that getting paid back with interest is not going to set you free from a label. And it's one of the problems with the industry that this agreement that labels have with artists details that artists' creations, when they were made with the label, still belong to the label, and that's a standard agreement. And that allows labels to continuously cheat artists. Now, exploitation continues because of the fact that labels all fall under the same legality because a large portion of them are owned by the exact same corporations. And those corporations are headquartered in the places that benefit them the most, like New York or California. They know which laws they can headquarter themselves under so that they can cheat artists more easily. And labels, again, have the exact same business model as banks. I just want to keep making that analogy because I love it. What banks do is loan it, and then they get paid back with interest. It's the exact same things that labels do. Now, the truth is that labels always exploit artists, and another form of exploitation is streaming. So how many of you guys recognize these streaming services? Yeah, a lot of you. How many of you download your music legally? How many of you, that's a pretty good number actually, how many of you stream more music than you download? Exactly. According to Berkeley Press, around 70% of streaming sales go directly to the label. That number is astounding. No one is sure how the remaining 30% is further split and how much actually goes to the artists, but that's a very serious case right now in the industry, and that's what a lot of artists are debating, whether or not to put their music on streaming because it just allows for no compensation. And the fact is that streaming is the leading form of entertainment right now in terms of music. And that's the medium, even though it's the leading one, that gives a less compensation to artists. That's ridiculous. Labels claim it all for themselves. Now, in that case, streaming is a relatively new form of listening to music. And in that case, record labels were able to predict that it was going to become popular and use that to their advantage. So they were able to adopt that medium and take away all that money. Now, they're able to divert most streaming revenue into their own hands. And streaming is the most popular way of listening to music. Now, knowing that, how, again, can it be that it's the medium that gives the least compensation to artists? It's ridiculous. Now, all these legalities and regulations, as well as unfair compensation, have the ability to take an extreme psychological toll on musicians. Can anyone read what that says on this cheat? Slave. Slave, that's correct. As a musician myself, that's pretty crazy. Someone willing to divert their performance and attention in order to make a statement. Prince would constantly go on stage with the word slave scrawled on his cheek to let people know he felt like a slave under his label. Mariah Carey also, she suffered a mental breakdown in the middle of an interview, which is a little ironic because she has a song called Breakdown. That was due to exhaustion because she was carrying out demands for a label, putting out promotion for her music. And as a result of the impact that profit-driven practices often have on artists, artists no longer trust labels to treat them fairly. I personally believe that it's ridiculous that most people, even you, sort of, especially artists, sort of just know that record companies are a little shady. That's exactly what Mariah Carey said. Something like, quoting her, industry rule number 480, record company people are shady. She's been in the music game since 1989. The fact that she would express distrust towards the label is an obvious indicator that record labels know they're making an investment without guaranteed return, and they'll extract profit from artists at any cost. Many artists have already begun to independently release their music, like I said, but that does not guarantee success. Andy Shaw, for instance, a great man, he's my favorite artist right now. Go listen to his music, Andy Shaw. He's amazing. Please go listen to him. He just signed to record label Anti, which is an independent label designed to give creative and legal freedom to artists. That sort of solves the problem a little bit and gives a little bit of creative liberty to artists, but it doesn't solve it completely. Their website reads, real artists creating records in their own terms. And actually, he wrote, produced, and recorded his album all by himself in his own studio, which is a luxury most artists would never be able to have in this industry. And that's an extremely positive step towards achieving more creative liberty. But he's not successful yet. He's slightly famous and he's getting a fan base, but would the risk of having a limited promotion that an independent label provides be worth it? Now, because the larger record labels are the ones that cheat artists, and I'm talking about the big three here. Universal, Warner, they're the ones that have to undergo legal reform in order to change the way that things are working. The solution lies in acquiring a balance between a musician's liberties and the label's advice, as well as addressing greed and loopholes in creative ownership. A report by Berkeley Press called Fair Music perfectly encapsulates that proposal by introducing what it calls a creator's bill of rights, along with other proposals, which would suggest that it's a bill of rights that every single creator should have and every single label should offer to the musician. The bill addresses all problems with record contracts, but it just can't be put into action quite yet. To get the proposal going, we have to actually have a greater protest for freedom. The death of a popular star, Prince, who I was talking about before, actually sparked a lot of talk about the need for more creative liberties. But what the community needs is a conversation instead of a murmur. We need to push the snowball off the mountain. Once it begins to roll, it'll gain the support of communities from outside of the environment of music as well, especially creators that understand how unfair it is to not receive compensation. So in conclusion, the future is bright, and labels can be tamed and change will come with time. Issues will be further addressed and patched, but what we need is to protest, like for example, signing an online petition to change the way that labels are working. And we have to understand now is when we're beginning to understand the tremendous effects that the issue presents, even though it began long ago in the 70s and 80s. So a legal battle is the answer. And it's the answer to preserving the integrity and reputation of the once respected industry. Thank you.
I will now take questions. CJ.
Is there a point when artists become so famous that it doesn't matter how much record labels take, they're still successful? And if so, how hard is it for an aspiring artist like you to achieve that point?
Yeah, there's definitely a point where it doesn't matter, but actually a lot of the things that happen is, like I said, record contracts will offer to cover expenses, and so what might seem like a big celebrity is just a celebrity being covered by the label's expenses. And like a lot of times in modern hip hop music, rappers will like show off their money on social media, but that money is actually not theirs. So it might seem like that person is extremely successful and it doesn't matter if the label exploits them. But what seems like their wealth is actually just a label paying for them. So I hope that answers your question. But there definitely is a point like Rihanna's not going to go bankrupt anytime soon. Now, what was your second question? What do I need to do?
And for you, how can you reach that point that you're so like popular that it doesn't matter if you get ripped off? How is it, not only for you, like how can any artist achieve that point?
First of all, artists like me are extremely lucky today to be able to have the mediums that we have to put our music. So there's a lot of different ways to not sign to a label and make sure I'm not exploited. Like getting my own fan base through YouTube and stuff like that. And if a label doesn't approach you just get a lawyer and make him read me the contract. Like I'm a third grader, so that I understand what's going on. And I'm just being smart about my decisions. Like most musicians, when they sign to labels, they think that, or when they start to get famous, they get one hit song and they sign to an enormous label, and they think they're immediately rich and they start spending tons of money. But like I said, they need to remember that that money is being charged to them by the label. So I could be signed to a label and they could be covering my expenses, but even though they're covering my expenses, if my music does not make enough money to pay them back, then I'm in debt. So a smart decision that I could make in the moment is just not start going crazy on money when I get one hit song. And that way, when I hold the label, I can make back myself in the music. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Is there like a union for artists in the sense that, for example, artists decide to get together and have it so that they have joint rights in that sense? You know,
that's a good question. I have no idea, but I know lots of artists start their own labels, which is could be kind of similar. They start like indie labels, which is short for independent, so that they don't have to go through all stuff that big labels do. Kind of stuff.
I know how SoundCloud, you don't really have to, like it's not a paid service. You can pay, but that's for special. How does Apple Music, for example, that you have to pay a subscription each month? How does that money, like what happens with that money? Does it go to the label? How it's divided? So you pay like $15 only.
Yeah.
Stream whatever.
Exactly. I have that exact same deal. I stream all the time. But that label, anyway, where Apple Music just pays artists depending on the amount of time that their music is played, and around 70% of that money goes directly to the label, and the other 30% of the remaining revenue that streaming produces for an artist is then distributed amongst songwriters, producers, people that master the album, and then the artists themselves. So the artists end up getting very little amounts. And if you think about it, we could listen to a song like 1 billion times paying just those $8, whereas having to buy it would make a lot more money on the long run if we bought different artists' songs. Does that answer your question? It's split up pretty unfairly. Yeah.
What are the differences between like there's 3 major labels and people attracted to each one? What they basically says that we have some risk club and others.
I would say they're essentially all the same. But EMI and Warner are probably one of the ones that have had the most like controversial things coming out recently. But they're essentially all the same. They're just huge labels that have a lot of different labels owned under their influence, and their head is just money, so they have to they have to keep marketing and producing in a way that they can keep generating profit. That's the standard mindset for labels.
Do you think that like most of the problem is caused by like artist lack of awareness when signing the contracts, or do you think that like the market sucks that even if artists did make some decisions and were aware of the risks, do you think they still would have to face these problems?
It's a little bit of both. Like young artists that don't have experience are gonna obviously be a little more. They're gonna succumb more to pressure to sign and not know what they're getting into. But there's also the involvement of labels themselves exploiting them. So the worst case would be inexperience and the label also giving them the record they don't even know how to read the contract. But I would say actually the worst problem is labels instead of artists that don't know what they're getting into.
If the legal reform that you hope to, that you want to be achieved, if the legal reform that you want to be achieved is implemented, how would that affect the publishing industry in general, apart from giving more power to the artists?
Well, the most important point of what I would like to propose is that artists still have ownership over anything they make, no matter if they do it under a label. I think that's one of the most biggest or the major problem in the industry, where if you make something, it still belongs to the label. They have the rights to it. I think that's pretty unfair. I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
How, if that is implemented, how do you think, how do you think it would affect the industry?
I think the industry would actually end up losing a little bit of money because in terms of the industry, the money would split up a lot and go in tons of different directions, but it wouldn't be too many. I think it would just be ethically correct more than anything. Ms. Rose.
You could look it. So here's my question for you. As consumers, or I would prefer the word audience of artists, what is our ethical choice? Like, what can we do to support musicians to make sure that they're being treated fairly as people
That's a
on
good
the
question. I would say spread awareness about the fact that they're being exploited, because one of the problems is the fact that everyone sort of knows that record companies are huge. And do you guys have any? Do you find it familiar that record labels, like, has this already been said to you? Yeah, for example, Pesha's case. So I think that you could definitely spread awareness about the problem, so that you could get some, like I said, you could get it snowballing. And personally, what I'm thinking of doing when I'm in college is doing the same, spreading awareness and talking to as many people that are higher in the system as I can.
Okay, but what in terms of my purchasing power? What I'm really asking is, market forces drive a great many things in this world, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So as a consumer, how shall I buy music in a way that's responsible toward the artist? What's the most responsible way for me to buy music?
It's legal for you as a consumer to stream music, but again, streaming is horrible in terms of compensation. So I would say if there's a song or album that you really like, definitely please buy it. Because I mean, I think we all have the money here to buy it, and it's pretty astounding how many people sometimes pirate their music in this community. But in terms of general consumers all around the world, buy music as much as you can.
So you're saying that the electronic technology that we now have for disseminating music isn't giving fair returns to artists. It's still, even though like buying a CD is so old school, I can barely stand the thought of it. It's how you would get the money, like if you put out an album.
Yeah, so it's not the most, it's not, if I were an artist and you bought my music, I wouldn't make as much money out of that as a live show. Live shows are what generate most of the profit for artists today. But it would definitely make more money than if you stream my songs.
Okay, but ultimately, the most responsible thing I can do is go watch live music.
Actually, yeah.
That's great.
Ernesto. Were you raising your hand?
Piracy is a big thing. So it's as unethical as the record labels, or even more unethical, I would say.
Mhm.
Do you think that which is a cost and which is an effect? So are the labels so unethical because of consumers, or are the consumers unethical because of the labels?
I would say the consumers are unethical. I'd say the record labels are out of the equation regarding piracy. I think the consumers are unethical because they don't realize that they're really hurting artists when they pirate music. But I would say also that record labels are unethical because they know the consumers are going to pirate music, so they just try it and they go on to sack the artist. It's unethicality from both sides. It's from everywhere, music industry or not.
If what you're trying to say about like the record labels, like if it doesn't improve, you who are going to study music, singing, and like in the future, and imagine you want to get big and like get out there and have people recognize you like in a very big way, like would you still join a record label knowing what you've been sharing with us? Would you put yourself in that position?
If I like their contract, yeah. Because a record, like being an artist under a record label is actually really comfortable because they'll do everything for you. But if I don't find anything that I like, then I'll work hard and independently release my music. But I would, at least
You were talking about how record labels, you don't think they should own artists' music. It's sort of a guarantee for record labels if they own artists' music. It's like, I own your music, you need to produce more music, or I'm gonna do whatever I want with everything that you're creating. Sometimes artists make an album and then don't make an album for a few years, and that doesn't work for record labels. So what do you think the record label should do if they don't own their artist's music? I mean, that's like their guarantee, or like they're gonna do something.
Well,
Their insurance, that's the word.
yeah. Usually record labels have like a certain amount of albums that they need from the artists. So I think we should have total freedom, artists, but it all depends on the contract that the record label offers you. I personally don't think that it would hurt the label not owning an artist's music that much. But that's just up to them to give an artist a contract that doesn't give them ownership to the music, but maybe requires a number of albums from the artist, so that they can, and maybe some due dates for those albums. The contract doesn't have to include ownership, but it could include a certain amount of albums that the artist has to complete before getting out of the record. So the contract itself, that way, if you don't give them the albums that the contract has, the label will be able to sue for damages. So it's all contract. The contract itself is the insurance. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
If an artist decides to release a music on iTunes and then, you know, how much money goes to that? Is it like 1%?
Yeah, no, it's a lot. I don't remember exactly, but it was close to, it might have been close to 50%.
Or, so even if you
It's like a fourth to 50%.
But you guys check the facts.
Yeah, this is my clouded memory, so don't trust that. But I remember it being like in between 20 to 50%.
So even if an artist does decide to release a music independently, the mediums in which he does it was still like.
Oh yeah, sure.
But what about YouTube?
What do you mean?
That you don't have to pay for that, right? You could release things on YouTube if you could figure out, then how could you make it generate a profits?
If,
Advertising.
yeah, if you put advertising on your videos before people watch, and then YouTube's gonna pay you.
And you can do that on YouTube and not have to pay YouTube.
Yeah, but there's lots of ways to avoid that with all technology that people have.
You guys are so true. Sarah, did you have a question?
I was wondering, like, is this recent, or since when has this issue with record labels happened?
Since the dawn of humanity.
Those stone records that they used to have.
There's cases from the 70s and 60s that relate to exploitation. And before that, there's a lot of undocumented cases.
I want you guys to know the 70s was not the dawn of humanity. Only the 70s. But actually, since from the time that there started to be a recording industry, there was this time. One of the first examples is Billie Holiday. Are you guys familiar with Billie Holiday? So it's a really interesting story. Just go back and it's probably enough. But thank you so much. Okay, will you pick one person in the room to be your secretary?